After 8 years apart, this lion is reunited with his former caretaker. As she steps into his enclosure, the lion's reaction is nothing short of astonishing. What did he do that was so unexpected? Could this remarkable behavior tell us something deeper about the emotional lives of animals? Welcome to Wonderbot Animals. One Saturday afternoon, the Masai Mara National Reserve in Kenya was abuzz with activities. The air was filled with the sounds of bustling wildlife and the chatter of park staff and volunteers going about their daily tasks. Among them was a caretaker named Jane, who could hardly contain her excitement. She was eagerly awaiting the arrival of someone very special to her, and the thought of seeing him again after 8 long years filled her with joy and nervousness. As Jane went about her duties, her mind kept wandering back to the last time she had seen her beloved friend. She couldn't help but wonder how much he had changed. Would he still recognize her? Would their bond still be as strong as it once was? The excited woman still remembered the day they met like it was yesterday. It all started when she was a volunteer at the sanctuary and decided to take a simple stroll through the forest. Jane had been enjoying the sights and sounds of nature surrounding her, but as she walked, she couldn't shake the feeling that something or someone was following her. She glanced over her shoulder several times, but each time there was no one there. Still, the feeling lingered, nagging at her like a persistent itch. Determined to get to the bottom of it, she continued on her path, her senses on high alert. And then, just when she least expected it, she caught sight of movement out of the corner of her eye. She turned suddenly, her heart racing with fear, but when she saw her stalker, she became surprised. Her stalker was a small lion cub who stared back at her with large, curious eyes. Jane couldn't believe her eyes. She had heard stories of encounters with wild animals in the forest, but she had never imagined she would come face to face with a lion cub in this manner. For a moment, she stood frozen in disbelief, unsure of what to do. As soon as the cub realized that the young woman had caught him, he stopped in his tracks and gazed at her with wide eyes. Jane couldn't help but chuckle at the young lion's reaction. He had the expression of a young child who had been caught red-handed doing something naughty. Instead of feeling scared or threatened, the volunteer found herself amused by the cub's antics. After all, how often does one come across a lion cub sneaking up on them during a stroll through the forest? As the cub continued to stare at her with those big, innocent eyes, Jane felt a wave of affection wash over her. There was something undeniably endearing about the way he looked at her, as if he were trying to figure out whether she was friend or foe. And then, as if making up his mind, the cub took a cautious step forward. Jane watched in awe as he approached her. It was clear that the little lion was curious about her, perhaps even eager to make a new friend, and she was more than happy to oblige. As the cub drew closer, Jane could see the excitement in his eyes. It seemed as though the little lion wanted to play, and the young woman couldn't resist joining in the fun. For the next few hours, Jane and the lion cub played together like old friends, chasing each other through the forest and rolling around in the grass. After playing for a while, the young woman stood up to continue her stroll. However, the young lion continued to follow her everywhere, his curious eyes fixed on her every move. Despite her attempts to shake him off, the cub seemed determined to follow her wherever she went. At first, Jane found it amusing, but even as she reveled in the joy of the moment, a nagging question lingered in the back of her mind. Where was the cub's mother? It was highly unusual for a young lion to be roaming the forest alone, and she couldn't help but worry about his safety. Had something happened to his mother? Was he lost or abandoned? Or perhaps he had simply wandered off on his own in search of adventure? By the time Jane reached the end of her stroll, she found herself drawn to the lion cub, his presence both comforting and disconcerting at the same time. Determined to ensure his safety, the young woman made her way to the nearest caretaker station and explained how she had come across the young lion in the forest. The caretakers listened intently to her story. Their shocked expressions mirrored her own. On the one hand, they found the idea of a young lion cub befriending a human quite amusing. It was clear that the cub had taken a liking to the volunteer, and they couldn't deny the sweetness of the scene before them. But on the other hand, they couldn't ignore the fact that the cub's presence in the forest posed a potential danger to both himself and the visitors. The caretakers at the sanctuary found themselves facing a difficult decision. They knew that taking the lion cub to the wrong pride could put his life in danger. If the adult lions in the pride were to reject the cub, they might become aggressive and harm the little one. It was a risk they couldn't afford to take. After much deliberation, they decided to launch an investigation to determine which pride the cub belonged to. As they went about their daily tasks of feeding the lions at the sanctuary, the caretakers kept a close eye out for any signs of agitation among the lionesses. They knew that a lioness who had lost her cub would likely be mourning its loss, and they hoped that by observing the behavior of the other lions, they would be able to pinpoint which pride the cub had come from. But despite their best efforts, they couldn't find any trace of agitation among the lionesses. The cats went about their usual routines, showing no signs of distress or mourning. It was as if nothing out of the ordinary had happened, as if the cub had simply appeared out of thin air. After a week of tirelessly searching for the lion cub's family, the workers at the sanctuary began to accept the grim reality that they might have to care for the cub themselves. Meanwhile, Jane had taken it upon herself to care for the little lion in the absence of his family. She had grown fond of the cub, and she was happy to care for him. Every day, she would spend hours with the cub, feeding him, playing with him, and providing him with the love and attention he needed to thrive. When the caretakers could not find the cub's family, they decided to assign Jane to be his primary caregiver. They knew that she had developed a special connection with the little lion and trusted her to provide him with the care and attention he needed in their absence. The volunteer took her new role seriously and devoted herself to the task of caring for the cub. Before long, the two became inseparable. The woman and her lion friend spent their days exploring the sanctuary together, playing games and enjoying each other's company. Asan, as Jane later named him, was a source of joy and companionship for her, and she couldn't imagine her life without him. The cub was growing bigger and stronger with each passing day, and she marveled at how much he had grown since the day she had first found him in the forest. He was a playful and energetic cub, always eager to explore his surroundings and learn new things. But raising Asan was not without its challenges. As he grew older, his playful antics gave way to a newfound independence and curiosity about the world around him. He would often test the limits of his strength and agility, venturing further from the safety of the sanctuary in search of adventure. At times, Jane found herself faced with difficult decisions as she navigated the complexities of caring for a growing lion. She had to strike a delicate balance between nurturing his natural instincts and ensuring his safety within the confines of the sanctuary. Before we continue with this story of true friendship, give this video a like to help it reach 12K likes and subscribe to our channel. Despite their close bond, Jane knew that she couldn't stay with Asan forever. She had dreams and aspirations of her own, and she knew that she had to pursue them. So, when the time came for her to go to college, Jane faced a difficult decision. She didn't want to leave Asan behind, but she also knew that she couldn't let her dreams go unfulfilled. Saying goodbye to the lion was one of the hardest things she had ever done. Before Jane left, she promised him that she would come back to visit him every summer and hoped that he would understand why she had had to leave. As Jane arrived at the sanctuary for her first summer holiday a few months later, the thought of reuniting with Asan filled her heart with anticipation. She had been counting down the days until she could see her beloved friend again, eager to spend time with him like they used to. But as she walked through the familiar pathways of the sanctuary, her excitement quickly turned to worry as she realized that Asan was nowhere to be found. She searched the different enclosures frantically, calling out his name in the hopes that he had simply wandered off, but no matter where she looked, there was no sign of her dear friend. Panic began to set in as she feared the worst. Had something happened to him? Had he been injured or taken away? Unable to shake the feeling of dread that gripped her heart, Jane approached one of the caretakers and asked about Asan's whereabouts. That's when she received the devastating news that the sanctuary had taken Asan to India on an exchange program with another sanctuary. She instantly felt relief as she realized that Asan was safe and sound, but her heart broke at the thought of him being so far away. Tears welled up in her eyes as she mourned the loss of their precious time together, realizing that she may never see him again. After the devastating news of Asan's departure to India, Jane struggled to come to terms with the sudden separation from her beloved friend. The sanctuary felt empty without his playful presence, and she found herself longing for the days they spent together. However, she knew she had to continue with her studies and pursue her passion for wildlife conservation. 4 years later, while out in the field conducting research, Jane received a surprising message. It was a notification from the sanctuary where Asan had been sent on the exchange program. They informed her that her beloved friend would be returning to the Masai Mara National Reserve for the first time after 8 years. Jane was overwhelmed with emotion at the news. After years of longing and uncertainty, she would finally be reunited with her beloved friend. She couldn't wait to see Asan again, to hear his familiar roar and feel his warm presence by her side. As the days passed, Jane counted down the moments until the lion's return. She prepared a special area for him in the reserve, ensuring that everything would be ready for his arrival. Her excitement grew with each passing day, and she found it difficult to focus on anything else. However, amidst the excitement, a feeling of apprehension lingered in the back of Jane's mind. What if Asan didn't remember her? What if their bond had faded over the years? These questions haunted her thoughts as she eagerly awaited his arrival. She longed to see his familiar face and hear his roar once again, but the fear of rejection gnawed at her heart. On the day of Asan's return, Jane joined the crowd of caretakers gathered to welcome him back to the sanctuary. Her heart raced with anticipation as she watched the transport vehicle carrying him approach. A mix of emotions surged through her as she caught sight of his majestic form through the bars of the cage. As the vehicle came to a stop and the gate swung open, Jane held her breath, waiting anxiously to see how Asan would react. Would he recognize her amidst the crowd of strangers? Would he approach her with the same affection he once had? Asan emerged from the cage, his eyes scanning the surroundings with a mixture of curiosity and uncertainty. Jane watched him closely, her heart pounding in her chest. For a moment, their eyes met, and she felt a surge of hope wash over her. Could it be that he remembered her after all these years? However, as the lion took his first tentative steps into the sanctuary, he seemed hesitant, unsure of his surroundings. Jane's heart sank as she realized that he hadn't immediately come towards her. She felt a pang of disappointment, fearing that their bond may have been lost to the passage of time. Determined not to let her doubts overshadow the joy of Asan's return, Jane resolved to give him space and time to acclimate to his new surroundings. She knew that patience was key in building trust with wild animals, and she was willing to wait as long as it took for Asan to feel comfortable. As Jane and the other caretakers went about their daily routine of feeding the lions, they approached a certain enclosure with caution. But as they neared the enclosure, something unexpected happened. One of the lions broke away from the group and began to approach them with slow, deliberate steps. The workers remained calm, their years of training kicking in as they carefully observed the lion's behavior. But as the lion drew near, Jane's heart skipped a beat as she realized who it was. It was Asan, her beloved friend. With a mixture of excitement and fear, Jane called out his name, her voice filled with longing and hope. For a moment, the lion paused in his tracks as if sensing something familiar in the sound of her voice. His eyes fixed on her with a mixture of curiosity and recognition. In that moment, all of Jane's doubts and fears melted away. Summoning courage, she approached Asan, extending her hand toward him in a gesture of friendship. And then, in a moment that took everyone's breath away, the lion did something truly incredible. With a graceful movement, Asan closed the distance between them, his majestic form towering over Jane as she stood before him, her heart racing with anticipation. The other caretakers urged her to step back, reminding her that the lion hadn't seen her in 8 years. Moreover, This was not the cute cub she had cared for. This was a huge adult lion, ready to prove his strength and courage to a pack who didn't recognize him yet. But Jane didn't move. She knew this lion, and despite all the time that had passed since they had last played together, she felt in her heart that he would not harm her. Perhaps he wouldn't let her play with his mane like she used to all those years ago, but he would not attack her. So, she stood her ground, allowing Asan to sniff her hands. And then, without warning, the huge lion leaned forward and pressed his massive head against Jane's chest, his deep, rumbling purr filling the air with a sense of warmth and affection. Tears welled up in Jane's eyes as she wrapped her arms around Asan's powerful neck, overcome with emotion at the sight of her long-lost friend. The other caretakers gasped in shock, surprised at the lion's reaction. They didn't think he could remember Jane after all this time, and yet he didn't just remember her, he still loved her. In the days that followed, Jane and Asen spent every moment together, catching up on lost time and reliving old memories. They went on long walks through the reserve, exploring familiar trails and rediscovering the beauty of their shared home. Asen's return brought a renewed sense of purpose to Jane's work at the reserve. With her friend by her side once again, she felt inspired to redouble her efforts in protecting the precious wildlife of the Masai Mara. Together, they embarked on new adventures, forging ahead with a renewed determination to make a difference in the world. And so, against all odds, Jane and Asan's remarkable journey came full circle and withstood the test of time. What a beautiful reunion! Do you think the special bond between humans and animals can last a lifetime? Do you think all animals remember the humans who loved them as babies? Tell us in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to like this video, share it, and subscribe for more.